Hi and welcome to The Practice Gap, the podcast for closing the gap between the practice you have and the one that you want. I'm Elizabeth, a chiropractor, a business owner, coach and entrepreneur on a mission to help you move from frustration and overwhelm to clarity, focus and joy in practice. 3, 2, 1, yeah. Hi and welcome to the studio, Haakon Kundle. Is that right in English also?
Yes, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And there's been so many interesting people on the podcast, so I feel very blessed to be here. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm super excited to have you here. Why don't you start by telling the audience a little bit about yourself?
So, my name is Håkon, and I am a chiropractor. And I live in Tønsberg and own my own practice.
And Tønsberg is a small town outside Oslo, about 50 minutes?
Yep. And it's a specialized clinic where we mostly see complex neurological cases. So I got into chiropractic after having too many injuries myself as an up-and-coming athlete, and I never saw myself as a chiropractor. I just wanted all my clothes to say Red Bull growing up. And that also led into a bunch of fractures and concussions and a lot of weird symptoms and disabilities that weren't that easy to detect. Even though I come from a chiropractic family, which they helped me tremendously when I was a kid throughout most of my injuries, but something lacked in the progress of even my brain processing was weird and off. And then I got introduced to functional neurology through my father and my uncle. And so I was like, okay.
Might I just add a little bit? Yes. You have both a mother and a father who's a chiropractor, yes. Which is very cool. I mean, that's quite unique. But keep on going.
So I was wondering what this functional neurology is, because it's a very vague, non-specific thing that not really many people know about. There's like, is it neurology? Is it not neurology? And how does it relate to chiropractic? And when I first received the treatment from Dr. Kerk in the States, it was a very revolutionized
experience.
Yeah. I was very unfortunate and had a really bad accident, which I ended up losing my memory and developing seizures and all these kinds of weird symptoms that didn't have any neurological base in the system. Like if you took an MRI, CT scan, or blood work, you wouldn't find anything wrong with me. And I was like, maybe it's just in my head, like it's a mental problem. And then when I got treated, I would say I went from like nothing to maybe 70% better within like 5 days of treatment. And I was like, whoa, this is very cool. And then that kind of got me hooked into functional neurology. So my dad was like, okay, do you want to do chiropractic? Then you just have to sit in functional neurology club at school until it doesn't sound Chinese anymore. But you also need to learn how to adjust. So you should also go into the Ganze club. So mostly my parents are old school gondroids. It was what they used to call themselves back in the days. And I think that really was the kickoff into how I became a chiropractor.
Cool. If you say you're from a chiropractic family, we know your mother and father is chiropractic, and then as I was saying that, then I realized you have more people in your family that are chiropractors.
Yes, we are kind of, as I grew, when I was growing up, I felt like we were kind of like the chiropractic mafia of Norway. I have an uncle and 5 cousins that are chiropractors, and then my mom, my dad, and then now me.
Wow. How was it growing up with such heavily based chiropractic family?
To be honest, I thought everyone got adjusted when I grew up. I was like, oh, you have a headache? Then just go get your neck adjusted. I was like, what? People take painkillers for that stuff? And but it was interesting because my mom and dad never pushed chiropractic on me. And that was a very interesting thing when I got to the States, because being what they...
Where did you go to school?
Oh, yeah. I went to school at Life University in Atlanta, Georgia, because my mom and dad, they went to Palmer University, but they said it's not fun in the cornfields. It's way more fun in Atlanta, Georgia, so you should go there. And on top of that, Carrick was affiliated with the school at that time, so I was very lucky to be in that time area.
What was the time you were in?
From 2011 until 2016. And there were so much cool stuff happening at Atlanta at that time. That was kind of like the hub of functional neurology. So we were super lucky with seminars and doctors coming in and out from all over Europe. A bunch of people from Norway and Netherlands and Sweden. Everyone came over to Atlanta to go through Carrick seminars. And so it was a very cool and interesting place to be. And so when I got to Atlanta, there was this term with all my student friends that said, "Oh, you're a chiro kid." I'm like, I don't know what that means. They're like, "Oh, you're second or third generation chiro." And I'm like, Okay, so they're like, "So you know how to adjust and you know all this stuff." I'm like, I don't know anything about chiropractic. I thought like I would, when my dad went into the X-ray rooms at the hospital to look at one of my fractures, I was like, "Why do you want to look at the fractures, Dad? You only crack bones. You don't really know anything about this." And he would still stay there, just humble and be like, someday you'll know. And then as I went through school, I was like, man, my mom and dad actually know quite a lot. They actually know way more. So I had all these epiphanies as I was in school. I'm like, whoa, that was the reason why I weren't allowed to do this, or this was the reason why we did this. And I think one of the reasons, besides all the injuries, why I became a chiropractor was I truly enjoyed my mom and dad's lifestyle and how they taught us about nutrition and just the way of living. So I remember living in Sydney, Australia in 2010, and I was like, "Dad, I don't really know if I want to do business and marketing and all this stuff that I'm doing down there besides surfing and kite surfing." And I asked him, "Do you truly love your job?" And he was like, "I love Mondays." And I'm like, I don't know if that many people actually truly love their job that much. So they're like, maybe there's something to this chiropractic thing. So then went over to the States, and then, the rest is history.
So you actually started a different education before you decided to chiropractic. How long did you, what made you make the decision? It is, I don't want to do marketing. How long have you?
Oh, I went down to Sydney for about 6 months and tried out many different things like business, marketing, architecture, and I was like, it's not really anything. And I'm like, okay, my mom and dad, they're happy, they're healthy, all their children are healthy. I'm like, maybe there's something to this thing that I don't really know anything about, which is chiropractic. And I remember moving back, and I wanted to move to Oslo and hang out with all my friends. And my dad was like, "You're over 20 years old, either get an apartment or start studying." I'm like, I don't know what I want to do. I just got back from Sydney, and then within 2 months, I got a visa and never seen the school. Just jumped on a plane to Atlanta, and then stayed in America for 6.5, almost 7 years.
So you finished life, and then what you went to then start working. For how long did you work in
So I worked for a little over a year at a clinic called Northwest Functional Neurology in Portland, Oregon. So
at that point, you already knew you wanted to specialize in functional neurology?
Oh, by the time before I started chiropractic. So my whole premise around chiropractic and how I see chiropractic all revolves around the nervous system. I learned how a chiropractic adjustment actually affects the nervous system more than I actually knew what the biomechanical components of moving a bone was before I started school. Because in undergrad, when I had to go through different courses in order to have enough credit to start chiropractic school, I did undergrad for 9 months, and I just sat in Neuro Club and Gonstead Club, and I actually got to hang out at Dr. Carrick's clinic at school for 9 months before I actually started chiropractic school. So I went around and was like doing some neurological rehab on patients, and I was like, oh, this is super cool to see people with crazy dystonic posturing all of a sudden sit up straight, and people are super dizzy or not dizzy within like 2 days of treatment. And I'm like, what is this thing? Like, this is so cool.
It sounds like you really ended up at the right place at the right time in history. Good for you. Could you explain to the audience what is the difference between just regular chiropractor or regular? That's kind of a big question. The just regular chiropractic experience compared to if you go into functional neurology, if you seek help at a functional neurology clinic.
So I don't think it's really, or it all depends on what your problem is, right? I think the coolest thing about functional neurology is it works for chiropractors, or it's made for chiropractors actually. Like, it's perfect for us, because the coolest tool I still have in my clinic is my chiropractic adjustment. I have all these fun toys, like a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, a bunch of different lasers, all these different infrared goggles. We have PMI mats, PMF mats, all these different technology tools are so cool. But still, the most powerful tool we have is the actual chiropractic adjustment. And this has been, I think this is the thing that kind of bothers me the most about our profession, is that when you look at all the miracles we do in clinic on a daily basis, which is why chiropractic is so cool, is it has very little to do with the biomechanical structure of our spine, but how we're able to change the frequency of firing of our nervous system through manipulations of either the spinal column or appendicular joints. So I think the cool, or what frustrates me in chiropractic in general, is that if you do chiropractic well and precise, you'll get profound and super life-changing, awesome experiences. But then if you do it kind of wrong, it still works pretty good. Yeah. And sometimes I wish it was more dire consequences of doing it and not so great, because then maybe people would get even more specific in their examination and the treatment, and not just go into this assembly line of working, which tends to happen sometimes when you've been in practice and have long hours and you have bills to pay and all this other stuff.
Okay, so if I'm a patient coming to you with headaches, and I've been to many of the different chiropractors, and where do you start with me, and what do you explain to me is the difference between what you do compared to what I'm used to doing? That kind of works, but it doesn't give me the last 20%.
Don't get me wrong, chiropractic works awesome. But when it comes to some of the patients that I see, their nervous system has more unstable components. So you kind of have to stabilize these components before you make the adjustments. Kind of like you don't want to run a 100-meter sprint without warming up. So you're trying to normalize and calibrate these little small intricate system, and then I can just deliver a high velocity, super loud crack, and it's amazing. And then all these things clears up, right? So when you come into my office, I spend probably 40 minutes of doing a case history with you, and I just want you to talk. Because when I listen to a patient talk and you actually let them explain and just talk for a good amount of time, they actually explain the symptoms and all their problems very well if you actually listen. And since I've been to so many different doctors and clinics myself, I feel the most important thing is to let them actually feel like they've been heard and let them just talk. Because a lot of time, we don't have time to this, let me just figure out the problem that you have. And so I don't need them to talk for 40 minutes, but I allow them to talk for 40 minutes because I think it gives you that doctor-patient trust and relationship right off the bat, because I'm going to do so much weird stuff afterwards. So
it's good to start with some basic trust. Yeah. That's amazing.
And so it takes about 2 hours to go through a first like an initial consultation in the office.
Okay, so I'm done with the 40-minute consultation. I tell all about me and my problems. What happens then? What do you do?
Then we go through eye examination. So we have these, it looks like huge diving goggles, and they have infrared cameras, which track your eye movements in different positions. So we do it in darkness and also with a screen that moves the dot around a lot. And this can tell us a lot about how your brain and nervous system is functioning, because you have this very cliche saying about eyes is the window into the soul, but it's actually the window into how your nervous system is functioning. So depending on what type of eye movement we look at, we can say if it's a frontal lobe activation or a parietal lobe activation. So different parts of your brain, I can look at, oh, is this thing properly functioning, or is this thing just a tiny bit off? Because most neurological symptoms or most neurological disorders don't really have any structural components in the brain. Like I said earlier, you won't find anything on blood work, you won't find anything on MRI scans, you won't find anything unless you actually do functional testing like balance testing, eye movements testing, cranial nerves, palpation, and all this stuff that all the chiropractors I know all know this stuff, but they tend not to use it, which I think is sad. And I wonder if it's if it's an educational bias of that they don't know or don't understand the importance of doing all this small stuff and how they can actually get even more specific into their treatment and get even better results with their patients.
Mm. On that note, I don't know if you know this, how much functional neurology do they teach in the different chiropractic school now?
That's a very good question. I know from Life University, they used to have at least 3 different clubs. Mm-hmm. When I went to school, we had basic neurology club, advanced neurology club, and advanced neurology club, and you had to take quite extensive examinations to be in order to go through to the next level. Kind of like in Gonstead club, you were able to do like a mock diplomate exam, which was really cool too. So you got to feel what it was like to actually take the diplomate Gonstead exam before you actually took it, if that's what you wanted to do after school. And we would have crazy cool Gonstead doctors like Linda Mullen, which was one of the first diplomates in Gonstead ever, or female diplomate in Gonstead, I to this day, I have to give her so much credit for my skills as a chiropractor and actually adjusting. So the cool thing about functional neurology at Life University is all these clubs that you can do after school, and also that there are a bunch of very, very, very good clinics that do functional neurology within like a 30-minute radius of driving from school.
So if I know that we have a lot of chiropractic students as listeners. If they are in a school that don't necessarily have a functional neurology club and they want to get started, but they don't, of course, they're students and they don't necessarily know, how can they start a club at their school? Do you have any suggestions?
I know some school has regulations if they're allowed to do clubs and all this stuff, but I know that Life University has a YouTube page and also an online page where you can they stream most of their club lectures. So even if you're in New Zealand or in England or in Canada, you can actually log in and see it. And a lot of them is already recorded. So you can look at all these videos and get started before you have to go and actually pay a bunch of money and all these hours that I've done in neurology. So do that first, and that will give you a tremendous leap into what working with functional neurology is.
So then if you're a student, you can gather some of your friends and you borrow a room, and then you watch these videos together and talk about it. Mm-hmm. So that could be a start, and then you can build from there.
Yep. So I think the coolest thing I heard in orientation when I got to Atlanta was Guy Reekman, a very good talker. He was the president of the school at this time. And I remember it's like it was yesterday. And he said, in order to become a chiropractor, you need 3 things. So this education that you will get over the next 3 to 5 years will only make you 1/3 of a chiropractor. Like when you get your diploma, you're only 1/3 of a chiropractor. And I'm like, what? Am I paying for something and I'm not even 2/3 of a chiropractor? This sounds really weird. And then he followed up with the second part is you have to observe other clinics and see what it actually looks like in the world. So you need to find a mentor, you need to find a clinic or multiple clinics and go and observe and look what chiropractic is to the world. Because right now you're in this bubble where everyone talks about chiropractic, and chiropractic is the most awesome thing in the world. And the third thing is you have to go to seminars, and you have to continuously work on both your adjusting skills, but also just your skills about treating patients, communication skills, and all this stuff. And when you have all those three together, that's when you truly become a chiropractor.
Okay, so if I'm saying that I've been working for 10 years and I've never really known anything, I kind of just heard about functional neurology, and I listened to you now and I was like, oh, this sounds really cool. If I would learn it now, or not me, I've been working for almost 30 years, so 10 years. How long will it take me if I'm like really invested? I'm starting with some YouTube videos. I take some courses. How long will it take me to become pretty good if I'm actually investing time and money in it?
2 years.
2 years?
Yeah.
That's not bad.
I think you would be good enough to see probably 40 to 50% of my patients.
Okay. And I'm going to have you back for another episode, and then we're going to talk about a little bit about more your clinic, the clinic you're in now. But before we do that, I want to get some more answers about functional neurology. So I've been working 10 years, and I'm super interested in diving deep into it. Where do I start?
I think the first thing you should do is go to a functional neurology clinic. And a real one, a real one, that sounds really bad.
Like to observe,
yes.
To find a clinic and come and say like, hi, I want to
Yes, because then you get to see what it's like to actually do it. Because there's a lot of chiropractors, and we have so many people here in Norway. I think per capita, I think we actually have more diplomates in neurology than any country in the world, which is super cool. But it's very hard to do just functional neurology. There are only, I think, a handful of clinics here in Norway that just do functional neurology, because it is quite the investment to just have like all the equipment that you need in order to run it perfectly. But that's why you have people that do 50-50 or 10 or 15%. And in order to do that, you don't really need to learn all the stuff I know and have gone through in order to just elevate your normal practice. And this is what I think is cool about functional neurology, is because if you just know a little bit more, you will be able to even get greater results in any of the techniques you do. If it's networking, if it's Thompson, if it's Gonstead, if it's working with children, if it's working with athletes, because functional neurology just gives you more biomarkers to test and retest afterwards. Because one of the things that I thought was hard coming out of school was, okay, my palpation skills, I've maybe touched like 100 people, and I'm trying to figure out, is this bone stuck or not, and which is it stuck in? Spinous right rotation, or how is it wedged? I don't really know. I'm trying to do lateral bending and all this, and then okay, this feels kind of stuck, and I adjust it, and afterwards I'm like, is it better? I don't know if it's really any better. But what I found with functional neurology is I could do a balance test. Because the balance test is easy. I just have to, close your eyes. Is the balance good? Cool. I adjust the joint that I think is stuck. Did the balance improve, or did it get better, or did it get worse? It's a very easy pre and post test. And sometimes now I found later in life, where my palpation skills are a little bit better, and I adjust it, and all of a sudden and I'm like, oh, cool. Now the motion palpation is so much better in this joint, but their balance is all messed up. And I'm like, was that really a good adjustment then? Or was it just me loving the crack? Yeah.
Some good questions. Before we go on, so I'm back into your office with my headaches. I have my red goggles on, some infrared light. Mm-hmm. So then I'm like 50 minutes into the consultation about?
Yeah, probably. Okay. So this test takes about 20 minutes, and we do blood pressure in laying down, seated, and standing position. Mm-hmm. And then we also do the same thing with pulse, like seated, laying down, seated, and standing, to look at differences in pulse mechanism from seated to stand, to see if you have what's called like POTS, or postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, or any form of dysautonomia. And then after that, we go back into my office and we do a full neurological exam. So we do cranial nerves, sensation, pinwheel, light and crude touch. We check all your reflexes, do bedside examination of eye movements. We do balance testing, and then we do gait analysis. So we just make you walk up and down the hall, look at stride length and arm swing. And then we do report of findings. So we go through all your stuff afterwards. But at that time, I'm fairly confident to see if you're actually a fit for the clinic or if we need to refer you somewhere else.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I feel I need to learn more about functional neurology. And I'm actually quite inspired, and I hope the whole audience is too. We're going to have you back after a little break, and then we're going to talk about more how the different work experience with more business-wise, owning your own clinic, working for someone else, working in the States compared to working to Norway, to give the audience tips and thoughts for their own practices. Does that sound like a good plan?
Cool. Excited.
Perfect. Thank you.